Okay, turn in your Bible if you could with me to Judges 14. And this is why some of them are laughing, is because I'm going to preach something tonight that I've never preached before. And I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But so I'm a little bit, as communicators and as preachers and leaders of the gospel, you have concepts that you've fleshed out, that you've preached many times. Some of you know this, if you lead and you speak a lot, you have concepts, and so you can roll in and out of it a little bit, and you have some go-to messages, messages you feel like the Lord's, not in a cheap way, but it's something, just messages and mandates you feel like the Lord has put on your life. But as I was preparing for this tonight, the Lord brought to my mind an encounter I had a few years ago out of this passage. And I try to get away, honestly, you can ask my wife, I try to get away from this one. So I'm preaching this tonight under the mandate of the Lord. So it's for somebody in this room. And if it's for one person, and this prepares you to do what Jesus has asked you, then it's worth it. So Judges 14, put your finger there. And I'm going to give you a little bit of context for why I'm going to unpack this passage. We've been working in the Middle East and in the unreached world. Frontier is what it's called in the missiological world, the frontier, which means people groups, nations, ethnos, people groups who don't have a self-replicating church, which means the number of believers in that people group. For instance, we work in a nation right now. One of our bases in the nation is in a nation of 81 million people and less than 20,000 believers in the whole nation. And what that means is without outside help, without the support of the global church, it can't self-replicate. The witness of the gospel can't expand. Then there's another category of people group called unengaged, where literally there's no record of anybody working among those people. And we've been working in those regions now for 10 years, about a decade. And when I started, MAPS, the number of unreached people groups, the total number of people groups, that's ethnos, that's tribes, that's families, the total number is about 17,000 identifiable ethno-linguistic people groups. I'm getting a little technical, but I just want to give you a context here. In the earth, 17,000. Out of that, 6,943. That was the number when I started in 2011-12. 6,943 were considered unreached, which is about 42% of the earth was yet to have a witness of the gospel. And a number of those, 3,500 just about, were unengaged. Nobody had even gone. And so that was the number. And so that number marked us, Statistics don't make missionaries, Jesus does, but they help to sound the alarm for us to get us into the face of the Lord of the harvest. And so as we looked at these numbers, and then we looked at the Bible, and we saw that there was a gap. There's a chasm between what Jesus said was going to happen and where we are. And so we just began to pray into that and weep over that, and if we begin to see. I think, Liz, did you say this last night, that it's the greatest injustice, right, in the earth, that half the earth is not have a witness of the gospel. And here's why it's particularly atrocious in this generation. It's because my generation, I'm a millennial, don't hold it against me. I was born in 1985, that's it. But my generation, I grew up, came into maturity and into adulthood in the generation that was given all of the information down to the numbers, statistic, places, and names of every people group in the earth. I was the first generation that was handed that. They put the number on it for us. They actually, if they put pins on a map and told us where it was, and they have pictures of people. Like, we know every one of their names. My generation grew up with that. In addition to that, my generation has more than enough money to get a witness of the gospel in every single ethno-linguistic people group. Traveling team said that if the church in America just gave 2%, just in America, we're not even talking about the global church, just talking about the church in America, just gave 2% of their outreach budgets, not even their total budgets, to Frontier Missions, we could fund a missions outreach to every unreached people group on the planet tomorrow. The money, there's so much money out there, guys. It's not a money issue. It's not a information issue. It's not an ignorance issue. It's not a people resource issue. We have so many anointed young adults, families. There's not enough stages in America to deal with all of our musicians. This is true. There's not enough conferences to steward all of the preachers that are coming out. There's just not. If we send 5 of every 1,000 young adults under the age of 30, we would have enough to put a team in every unreached people group on the planet. This is just America alone, okay? We're not even talking about the global church. And so that's my generation, grew up with that. We can't plead ignorance on it. We can't say we don't have the money, and we can't say we don't have enough people. It's not a mobilization issue, because in the last 20 years, we've spent more money, time, and energy mobilizing for causes than we ever have in history. This is true. We've put more money, time, effort, and energy into mobilizing for causes in America, the church, I'm talking about the church, than ever before in history. In fact, I've personally been a part of almost 15 stadium gatherings in the last 20 years. There's been about 20 just in our world, just in our streams. I'm not even talking about Promise Keepers. I'm talking about just in our world. 20 stadium gatherings. 20. I did the math. It's about $100 million that we've spent on stadium gatherings in the last 20 years. I'm not against stadium gatherings, but I think mobilization is important. But there's a gap here, because in that same time frame, between 2000, when we started in 2011, 6,943. 10 years later, the Joshua Project put out the new numbers. They updated every 10 years. And in 2020, it kind of flew under the radar because there was a lot of crazy stuff happening in 2020. You remember that? There's a lot of crazy stuff. You guys remember that? Remember we tried to have an election and our minds blew up? And then a global pandemic. And Joshua Project posted, they put the new statistics out. And it kind of flew under the radar. But over the last 10 years, where we've done more stadium gatherings, more mobilization, we've made more money than ever before in history. We've planted more megachurches, multi-site megachurches in the last 10 years than ever before in history. In fact, the vast majority of megachurches that have been started in the United States started after 2011. And so more multi-site megachurches. We entered the age of the celebrity pastor and the Christian influencer and the platforms and the social media and all of that, which is, I have nothing against that, but here's the problem. In that same time frame, 2020, Joshua Project put out the statistics, and unreached peoples didn't go down. We didn't take any names off the list. In fact, it went up by 500. I remember I read it when I was flying back from our Eurasian mission space after we did our first indigenous school. And I was on top, I was flying on, no pun intended, but I was on cloud 9. I was flying back. I thought, we're doing this. We're training indigenous leaders. They're going to plant churches in their nations. And I'm going, and I'm typing away, we're doing it, God, we're doing it. And I said, you know what, I haven't checked Joshua Project. And I opened it up and I looked and the new number was out, 7,402. And I thought, how could that be? There's no way. I thought there must have been a mistake. I was like, so I took a deep dive. Sure enough, in the same decade that we planted more mega churches, we had more stadium gatherings, we spent more money. The church disengaged even more from the Great Commission. And I started to ask the Lord, I said, Lord, how? I don't understand. And there's a number of reasons I think that we as leaders in the church, and especially in the prayer, prophetic, missions movement, we have to have serious conversations right now. This is not an hour for small answers, quips, preaching points. This is an hour for deep conversations about where we're going to leave this thing when I'm 50 and 60. And because if something doesn't radically change, I know Jesus is going to get his inheritance. I know that. But if something doesn't radically change here, we're going to be left on the sidelines. And Jesus will mobilize, and he's going to, whether we're engaged or not, he's going to mobilize Southeast Asia. He's going to mobilize China to go into the 1040 window. Sub-Saharan Africa. But what a terrifying idea that we would show up on the sea of glass at the end, stand before Jesus, having not played much part in him receiving what he was due. Instead, wasting our lives trying to get a little bit more here, or our name out there a little bit more. You know, I look at everything we've done, and it just feels to me like we've spent more energy, time, money getting our name out there than getting Jesus' inheritance. But when I just started to ask the Lord, how do, you know, I'm going to take this personally. Lord, I'm going to take this personally. And I'm going to make sure my staff and our leaders here, we've talked about this. We're taking that number personally. And we're going, whatever that means, whatever it takes, Lord, in 20 years, because of our yes, we want to start taking names off that list, not seeing names added to that list. Whatever that means for us, that's what we're going to do. I take that personally. I take personal responsibility for that number. But I began to dialogue with the Lord about this. And what I begin to realize is that because we have a lot of money, and because we've got a model, we know how to get a lot of people mobilized towards things. What's happened is we've got a lot of people that we've got excited about the big yes, but we haven't prepared them to walk the long obedience in the same direction. Because our messaging has set expectations that if you say yes, you go to the event and you go, yes, I'm in, then the very next step you take, all the doors are going to fly open for you. He's got the key of David. And you're going to soar into your destiny. And from day one, you're going to be effective and fruitful, and that's the expectation that we've created with some of our messaging, because the gospel call doesn't sell well. It doesn't sell well. It doesn't make a good video. It doesn't. It's a dirge. The gospel call is a dirge. It's not a pop song. It's a dirge. And that doesn't sell. It doesn't sell. I know, it doesn't sell. Put this verse up if you could. Who's back there? El Bell. Matthew 24. You guys know this. We quote this all the time. And this gospel of the kingdom, 24:14, will be preached, proclaimed in all the world as a witness to every ethnos, and then the end will come, right? We know this verse. It's got, as my friend Corey Russell said, it's tattooed on our spirit. That's going to happen. It's in red. It's going to happen. This gospel is going to be proclaimed to the whole world as a testimony to all nations. That's ethnos, that's tribes, that's families. And then the end will come. The end of the story is not crisis. The end of the story is Jesus is going to receive his inheritance. But what we failed to do is put that verse in the context of what Jesus was talking about, which is ethnic hostility, global crisis, betrayal in the church, love growing cold. And then the verse right before it, that's not 1 through 51. I don't know what that is. It's Matthew 24:14. Verse 13, put verse 13 up if you could. It says this: but the one who endures to the end will be saved. Long obedience in the same direction. The one who endures through racial tension and ethnic hostility, love growing cold, wars and rumors of wars, kingdom against kingdom, ethnos against nation, kingdom against kingdom. That's basilia, that's war. Love growing cold, betray one another, but the one who endures to the end will be saved, and this gospel of the kingdom. The ones who endure are the ones that carry the gospel of the kingdom to the ends of the earth. Which means before we can mobilize a generation to go to the ends of the earth, we have to disciple them to endure. We're good at getting them to say yes, the big yes. We're bad at teaching them to live the 1,000 little yeses every day that make up the big yes. A few years ago, I was in the Middle East. I was on a trip to the Middle East. We were visiting one of our bases. Chris and I were actually on this trip and doing a pastoral care visit, and then we flew over to a location that we were planning to plant our next Frontier Missions base at. This was a number of years ago. Now, I've never told this story, I don't think, publicly. And so we were flying into the city. I'd been there once, I think. We were coming back in. We were going to meet with a group of young adults that were starting to get stirred for prayer. And we felt like maybe this is the next place. We're taking new territory, and we're going to plant a new missions base. And as soon as I landed in the city and got off the plane, it's hard to describe. I want to try to paint with words, but it's like the deepest despair came over me. I was thinking thoughts that I don't think I've ever thought. There was a dread in my spirit. And it wasn't that kind of thing where it's like, oh, I recognize this and thus says, it was like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? Oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? Oh my God, I have no business doing this. Oh my God, what if it fails? What if I get all these people signed up and then we don't have the money? What's going to happen? And for 2 days, I was in the darkest place. I mean, I was not a good travel buddy. You remember this? And I was trying not to bleed on Chris. He's like, dude, are you all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm just going through something, man. I don't know. And in my spirit, I'm going, we're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. And it was just, this thing came on me. And my deepest fears were coming to the surface. It was just out of the blue. And in that state, we went over to the house to have dinner with this group of young adults. They made us dinner, and we walk in, and we ate dinner, and I'm just sitting there going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what do I do? This thing's gonna the rug's gonna come out from under us. I don't know what to do. And then we go to the living room, and the goal of the meeting was to cast vision to them for why we should rally together and plant a base and build a house of prayer. And I'm sitting in the corner and I begin to talk. And as I began to talk, it felt like a word came out of my mouth. And as soon as it got out, a piece of massive lead got attached to it, and it poof, fell to the ground like that. And I just feel like, God's really stirring up prayer. And it was like every word just, and the poor kids, they're just like, you all right? And I tried to do a pitch. It was bad. I didn't, and they're, and they were there because they're like, these people, these guys are going to help us. These leaders are coming in. They're going to help us do the dream, And I'm going, oh my God. And finally, I just said to them, I'm so sorry, guys. Can we just pray in the Spirit? I was like desperate. I could feel it right now. I was so desperate. I was like, can we just pray in the Spirit? And, I'm supposed to be like the guy, and I'm like, this is. I said, can we just pray in the Spirit? And I literally dropped to my knees in the middle of that. Do you remember this? I dropped to my, I've never told this story except for, a few of them in the room are on staff with us now, so you know this story. I dropped to my knees in the middle of the prayer room, and I began to pray in the Spirit. And I began to wail in the Spirit. I began to cry out in the Spirit. And as I'm on the ground, it wasn't a warfare tongues. It was a desperation. God. And I'm on the ground. And all of a sudden, I go into an open vision. I'm out of the room. I don't know what's happening in the room anymore. I go into this open vision. And I'm literally hanging, like suspended over this abyss of a burning pit. And I'm hanging there over this. It looked like lava and fire. It looked like I was in the inside of a volcano. And all of a sudden, this is really vulnerable. Sorry. I knew this was going to be intense, but I didn't know it was going to be this. I'm praying, and all of a sudden, out of my chest, as I'm suspended over this abyss, this drop of honey comes out of my, and it touches, as soon as it touches, it extinguishes all the fire. And I looked up. I looked around the room, and they're all staring at me. And one of them said, "When did you learn Arabic?" I said, "What are you talking about? I don't know Arabic." She said, "You were speaking in Arabic." She said, "You said over and over and over, Lakoa Ela Bilaman, Lakoa Ela Bilaman, Lakoa Ela Bilaman." I said, "I have no idea what that means." They looked at us. "You hear it?" "Yeah, I heard it." "You hear it?" "Yeah, I heard it." Lakoa Ela Bilaman. I said, "What was I saying?" They said, "You kept saying over and over and over, there is no power without faith. There is no power without faith." I went, "Oh my God." I said, "Well, I was in this vision, and I told him what I saw, and this drop of honey came out of me and extinguished the fire." And the girl that was sitting on the couch, she had her Bible open, and she said, "Oh, that's Judges 14. I said, "I'm so sorry. I don't know what Judges 14 says." I guess I need to read the Old Testament a little more. I could not pull Judges 14 to save my life. She goes, you know the story about Samson and the honey? I said, I don't know that story. And so I read this story, and let's read it together. Judges 14. We made it there. I told you to keep your... Verse 4 is where we're going to... verse 1 is where we're going to start. Samson went down to Timnah. And at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. And he came up and told his father and his mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. But his father and mother said to him, is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all your people? Why do you have to go to the uncircumcised Philistines? They pulled the family relative card thing. Anybody ever pulled that on you? Just stay around your own people. Our people don't do that kind of thing. But Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she's right in my eyes. Look, verse 4. His father and mother did not know it was from the Lord, for he, that's the Lord, was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. Pause. God put something in Samson's heart. Now, just for context here, the chapter before is Samson's birth, where the angel of the Lord, that's the pre-incarnate Jesus, shows up. and then he goes up in the flame of fire and says, is not my name wonderful? This is the first story of Samson. So Samson doesn't know yet that he's got, when the Spirit comes upon him, he's got supernatural strength. He doesn't know that yet. Okay? He's a young man. He's yet to experience the anointing and what happens specifically for him under the anointing, which is supernatural strength. And this first encounter or story we have with Samson is that God put something in his heart because the Lord's seeking to take new territory. The Lord's looking to break through and take territory from the enemy, so he puts this desire in this man's heart. And Samson goes, I think there's something in my heart that I want to go after here. And the first thing he's got to navigate is the nuclear family and the people around him going, why do you got to go do that over there? Just stay with your own people. Like, we don't do that kind of thing. Like, it's got to be somebody else. Like, and they throw the relative family card, and your mother's such a worrisome. Why would you do that to your mother? Why would you do that? Stacy already talked to us about this. If anyone who loves father or mother, sister or brother, son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And so Samson, he sets out to do what he feels like God's drawing him to do. He shuts out all the naysayers, the voices, the pressures to be something that the family wants him to be, and he's going to do what God said. And he sets out on the road. And then look what happens. So he said yes. We got him signed up. He signed the interest form at the event. He said yes, he's going to do it. And look what happens. There's a yes in his heart, and he sets out to obey. Verse 5, Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah. And then this is fascinating. There's just goes to the next verse, but between that period and the next word, his parents go no further, and he's got to go alone on the next part of the journey. The mother and the father only go so far, and they stop. And then what happens next? He has to face alone. And it says this, and behold, a young lion came towards him roaring.
And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion into pieces as one tears the young goat. But he did not tell his father and mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked to the woman, because she was right in his eyes. And after some days he returned to take her, and he turned aside and saw the carcass of the lion. And behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion, and honey. So he scraped it out into his hands and went on eating it as he went. And he came to his father and mother and gave them some, and they ate. But he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey from the carcass of the lion. Samson sends out. He says, yes, I'm in. I'm going for it. He sets out to obey the voice of God. And as they start traveling down, at some point, mom and dad say, hey, we're going to stop here. We're going to camp. You go out ahead. And so he keeps going out alone. And as he's obeying God, as the Lord has put it in his heart, and it's the Lord's will, it's God leading him to take the territory. God wants to take land back from the enemy. God wants to break in and displace the enemy and set up and deliver Israel. It's God's will, and yet on the way, God allows a lion not to just kind of stroll across the path, but it says this, that the lion came out roaring at him. Keep in mind, Samson at this point, there's no indication that Samson had any knowledge that he would have supernatural strength when the anointing came. And here he is, he's walking down the road, and all of a sudden, a young lion, it's not an old lazy lion, he's not just sitting in the Serengeti lapping, this is a young one, he's got strength on him. And he comes roaring at him, and Samson has to make a decision at this point. Do I go back from the way I came, or do I face the lion? And we find out in Hebrews 11, there was actually a decision made at this moment. See, we read it, and it says, and the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, although he had nothing in his hands. But the Spirit of the Lord rushing upon him didn't happen in a vacuum. He wasn't just, the lion comes roaring and all of a sudden, whoa, Spirit's on me, I'm going. That's not what happened. He had to make a decision, and once he made a decision, the Spirit added strength to that decision. And when the Spirit came alongside of him, he tore the lion in pieces. No one saw the battle. He had to fight it alone. He had no weapons in his hands. There was nothing that you could say it this way. He was under-equipped. He was ill-equipped. He was under-resourced for this battle. He was inexperienced. He had never faced anything like that. All he had was a knowing in his heart that God was leading him into a place that he did not go before, he had not been before. All he had was a knowing in his heart that God wanted him to go into the Philistines. And at some point he makes a decision as the lion, it doesn't say the lion stopped, it says the lion's coming towards him. He makes a decision, I'm going forward. Tore the lion apart, and then went down into the territory that God was leading him into. And as he's returning, he sees that a swarm of bees has filled this lion carcass and made a nest, and he looks at the place of the battle that he fought alone in his secret victory. There's a sweetness. In the place of the hidden victory, he scrapes out the sweetness, and he takes it and he nourishes the family on the sweetness of a hidden victory.
He fed his family, the very ones that discouraged him in the first place. He is now feeding them from the sweetness of a battle that they know nothing about. This is the story of what it looks like to pioneer. See, if Matthew 24:14 is true, then there's a lot of people around the earth that are in the wrong place right now. If Matthew 24:14 is true, and if Jesus is returning anytime in the next couple hundred years, then there's a lot of people in the wrong place. And many have said yes, but because we did not prepare them for what's going to happen if they're going to go into new territory, they took a step in the right direction and said, oh, we didn't sign up for this, we're going back that way. What was operating in Samson's heart that caused him to move forward into the mouth of a raging lion? Do you know what was operating? Faith. Look at this verse. This is the first time I ever heard someone preach on Hebrews 11 was Michael Brown. Back in Brownsville, I grew up around the Brownsville guys, and they recorded. This was like a cassette tape crew. I'll tell if you don't know what that is, I'll tell you later. But there used to be these things called cassette tapes, and I got a cassette tape of Michael Brown and preaching on Hebrews 11. And I always read this verse. Do you have it up? Hebrews 11. Look at this. I always read this verse, and I never connected it to what it was actually talking about. Have you ever had that happen to you? Hebrews 11:32. Are you there? It says this. What more shall I say? This is talking about the people, the patriarchs that live by faith. What more shall I say? For a time would fail me to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets. Next verse. Who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, and stopped the mouths of lions. See, I always read that, and I immediately went to Daniel. Because that's the story we all tell about God stopping the mouth of lions, because we like that one because Daniel got really famous because of it. Right? The king didn't want him to happen. He said, oh no, why Daniel? Put him in there. He spent the overnight in the thing. They open him up. They promote him to the highest place. But that's not what that verse is about. It says Samson, go back to the list. Samson, Barak, Jephthah, Samson, the verse before it. You're doing a great job. I know I'm giving you work tonight. There you go. David, Samuel, and the prophets. Do you know 2 of those men fought lions in secret? David faced a lion. Before David, in 1 Samuel 17, before David could challenge Goliath, what was the resume that he presented to Saul? He said, is anybody going to challenge this Philistine? This is Goliath? Everybody's, no, we're going to. David goes, oh, I'll do it. And Saul goes, you're just a young man. This guy's been fighting in the secret, the special forces since a kid. What makes you think that you're going to be able to take on Goliath? And David goes, well, when I was a shepherd out in the field alone, when the lion came to steal one of the sheep, I grabbed it by the beard. He said, when there was a lion and a bear,
I caught him by the beard, struck him, and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be just like that. I have a history, a secret history in God of winning battles that nobody knows about. So when it's time to fight the big battles, I have a history of knowing what to do. Before David could challenge Goliath and win the battle on the national platform, he had to win the battle in secret. He had to face the lion. A whole nation was a recipient of the sweetness of David's victory because of David's hidden victories. Because he faced the lion in secret, he had the wisdom to know what to do with Goliath. See, everybody knew Goliath needed to be dealt with. But David had the wisdom, because he had a history in God of knowing God's ways. And so when David goes, I killed the bear and the lion, Saul goes, great, put this armor on. He goes, nope, it's untested. The strategy's not going to work. I actually know how God works in these situations. I've been here before. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Right? And what did he do? Goes to the brook, gets the 5 stones. You know this. Jason said this morning, and it just struck me how he said it. He said, sometimes wisdom and faith are the same thing. Wisdom is the sweetness that comes out of hidden victories. Wisdom, you can only obtain wisdom by faith. How do I say it better for you? If you don't step forward in faith, then you don't get the sweetness of the wisdom on the other side. See, wisdom's more than just being smart. Wisdom is knowing how God does things. It says, by wisdom he created the worlds. We know what he created, but how he created it, that is wisdom. To touch wisdom is to touch the mind, to know what God does, how he does things. Wisdom is the honey. Proverbs says that wisdom is like the sweetness of honey. Wisdom, this is why we need the spirit of wisdom and of revelation. You see, there's a lot of people that are taking the piece of revelation that they got and they're going out there and blasting it. But because it hasn't been refined and it's not encapsulated in the meekness of wisdom, what ends up happening is they weaponize their revelation that they have against people. It might be actually a real revelation, but because wisdom, because it's not coming out of a secret history in God, they weaponize it and they try to work it against people. Or they try to use that piece of revelation to build up a platform for themselves. Look at my revelation. You know, you can have a real revelation from God, use it in the wrong way, and it'll be wrong. We're mobilizing a whole generation to fight Goliath, but they have no idea what they're doing. Like, we're going to go take down the giants in the land. You haven't even fought a lion yet. And we're setting them up for massive disillusionment. Because we told them if we all mobilize together and take down the Goliath, we're going to win.
they took a step in that direction. They faced a lion and they got messed up. I'm trying to be careful, but we've got to really wrestle with this, like this whole thing right now, and this revelation of what everybody wants to say, what God we should be doing and what God thinks we should be doing. But if we just spend, if that voice of that platform is just talking about how everyone else is wrong, but there's no honey feeding you, you can't just build a platform on why everybody else is wrong. What do you have? Wisdom comes out of faith. Fear loves to mask itself as wisdom. You know this, right? Fear loves to put the mask on as wisdom. But fear is false wisdom. I mean, Proverbs is really clear. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, which means the fear of man, or man-given fear, is the beginning of foolishness. Sounds like wisdom, but James says it's earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. So the meekness, he goes, who's wise and understanding by you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but it's earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Then James goes, you know what true wisdom is? Let me give you a taste of the honey. The true wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, then gentle. When's the last time you heard somebody blast their prophetic revelation, but it came gently? Because it's coming with honey. It's coming with wisdom. Look at this next one. Open to reason. Full of mercy. Good fruits. Impartial. Which means it doesn't take sides. And sincere. A harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Samson makes a decision. I'm going to go forward in faith, even though I'm under-resourced, I'm unskilled. I've never done this before. I'm going to move forward into the mouth of the lion. Then the Spirit endorses that decision. And then he feeds a whole generation on the honey of a secret victory. Same with David. But did you know that the greater Samson and the son of David also faced the lion? See, I think this is one of the most under-taught parts of Jesus' life. We always skip it. But without this part, we don't get the sweetness of the finished work of the cross. We don't get the honey. You know what that is? Jesus goes into the waters of baptism. He comes out, and everyone around them hears an audible voice of God. This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Then it says the Spirit, like a dove, wrapped himself around Jesus. And then it says this, the next verse is so bizarre. It says, and the Spirit led him into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. The Spirit did that. He had to face the lion. He had the anointing, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me. He's going to come out of there and read Isaiah 61 and Luke 4:18. But before he can launch into that ministry and let the sweetness, he's got to win the hidden victory. And he goes into the wilderness to face the lion for 40 days. And this is what he does. He doesn't bulk up. right? You start bench pressing. Oh, I'm going to take this line on. You know what he does? He goes on a fast, 40 days. Empties himself of human strength. Empties himself of anything in his natural humanity that would want to, when the lion comes, go, ooh, I can take this. Empties himself to the point where all he can do is lean on the third person. See, if Jesus bulks up and takes him, then he leaves us in the dust. But if he shows us how in our weakest moment, if we lean on the third person, it says the devil came to him. And he asked him 3 questions. You know, there's the 3 temptations. But let me tell you, the destiny of the cosmos hangs on those 3 questions. If Jesus falters, the cosmos are doomed. Because if he falters, he sins, and then he can't take on the sin of the whole world, because then he'll have to pay for his sin first. And Satan comes to him and says, if you are the Son of God, straight after the identity statement that God, the Father spoke over him 40 days earlier, straight to the, if you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. You go, what's the temptation? Stones, bread? I don't get it. What is Satan pulling on in the heart of Jesus? What is he trying to get him to stumble into? He's trying to pull him, he's trying to get Jesus to stumble into the thing that we wrestle with every day. You know what it is? Impatience. That lion of impatience. Is my timing better than God's timing? Is turn the stones into bread. Obviously, Satan would say, Jesus, hey, time out. Just take some inventory here. You haven't eaten in 40 days. Like naturally, you're hungry. And when do you know when God's going to supernaturally provide for you? That could be way off. Do something. Do something. Do something. You're just waiting around. Just do something. Just make it happen, man. Come on, let's go. They're right here. There's grace. God will understand that you needed bread. You needed to get something done. And Jesus looks at the lion and says, it is written that man shall not live by bread alone, but every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. What is he saying? What is he saying? I'm completely dependent on one person for everything that I have. I will not step out because of my own cravings. Won't make me do it. Yeah, I'm hungry, but God will provide. Yeah, I don't know when he's going to bring the supernatural provision, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to face the line of impatience, and I'm going to wait. Because what I need more than bread right now is dependence on the Father, every word that proceeds from his mouth. Jesus says, I'm going to wait. He didn't know. If he would have just turned the stones to bread and eat, okay, I know God's got a plan, but I'm really hungry. I need to, you're right. I need to get something going here. I'm just going to turn these stones, boom, boom. The cosmos is done. He stumbled in impatience. Mike Bickle tells this story when he was a young man, the Lord visited him and said, because of your impatience, many will stumble. If you're going to say yes to taking new territory, to stepping out, to big yes, you know what you're going to run into?
impatience. You know what you're going to run into? The timing is going to be like nothing you imagined. And what you thought will take 1 year is going to take 10 years. I'm preparing you. How many of you have been around long enough to know? What you thought was going to happen in 1 year is take 10 years. But the things that you thought were going to be 10 years away happen to you really quick. And so you've got to relinquish the control of timing. And you have to learn to depend on every word that comes from the Father's mouth. It's not my job to control the outcome or the timing. It's my job to obey when He speaks. You've got to face the lion. If you just try to manufacture it and get it going, you're going to get right off your destiny track. Satan goes, whew, took another one out from taking more territory. Satan goes, okay, impatience didn't work. He drills a little deeper. This one hurts, guys, just so you know. This one hurts. This one's going to hurt. He takes him up to the top of the temple in Jerusalem. Satan brings him Jesus up to the top of the temple. He's standing at the top of the temple. They're looking down, and Satan says, throw yourself down from here. If you're the Son of God, throw yourself down from here. And then Satan does the most fascinating thing. He's not fascinating, but it's the most manipulative thing. He quotes a Bible verse. For it is written, He will command His angels concerning you, and on their hands He will bear you up lest you strike your foot against a stone. And Jesus is standing on the top of the temple looking down, and there's all of Israel coming to worship Yahweh. It's the temple that it was the resting place. It was the place He gave the blueprint for to Moses and David and Solomon. And there the leadership of Israel is all below Him. And this second lion that He's staring down is the deepest insecurities of the human heart. The ones below, the leadership of Israel, the nation coming up to worship Yahweh, these are the very ones that He's in covenant with, and these are the very ones that He's going to hang the promise of His return on. His identity as Messiah is connected to Israel's acknowledgement of that ministry. And so Satan goes, throw yourself off, and what's going to happen according to the Bible is that you're in midair, the angels are going to catch you, you're going to be floating over everyone, everyone's going to look up and go, He is the Messiah. Look at Him. Was there any need in Jesus' heart to test it out? The word that God said over Him, you're my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. The assignment God spoke to Him. Was there any need to test it out and make sure others affirmed it to make sure I knew if it was true or not? Was there a need for powerful leaders to affirm so that I really know that God says who I am? Was there a need inside of Jesus to have others endorse Him so that He really knew that the ministry God gave Him was real? Would He only be successful if others acknowledged and affirmed it? Or was there doubt? Was there fear in the heart of Jesus? And Jesus looked at Satan and says, again, it is written, you shall not put the Lord your God to a test. Jesus looks at the lion, right in the roaring mouth of the lion, and says, I have no need to test the Father. I take Him at His word. He alone gives me my identity, and He alone defines my success. I am who He says I am, period. Period. There's no fear of man lurking in Jesus that, you know what, maybe if Chief Priest Bobby said it was, maybe then I would really know it's true. There was no Chief Priest Bobby. He's probably named Levi or something. Insecurity, the lion of insecurity, is one of the most dangerous traits in a leader with power. Because that gaping hole of identity, married to power, will manipulate and abuse and use people to satisfy, to affirm its own craving. It will take all the credit when things go well. It will take none of the responsibility when things fall apart. And people are just a commodity for their own ambitious vision. Jesus says, I'm not going to be a leader like that. Insecurity will look at every gifted person as a threat. Insecurity will say, God could not be working anywhere else more important than what He's doing right here. If you say yes and you set out to take new territory, your deepest insecurities are going to surface. And you will either face that lion and win a hidden victory of going, God, what you say over me, what you did for me in Jesus at the cross adopted me. My sonship is secure, no matter if I have the finances for this or not. No matter if leader A or leader B says whatever they say. No matter if people like it or they don't, my identity is secure in what God has said and what He did for me in Jesus. If we don't win that battle, we're going to be moving out of insecurity and manipulating people. Satan couldn't get Jesus to move out of insecurity, so he goes for the jugular. He took him for a very high mountain, you know this, and showed him the kingdoms of the world and their glory. Do you know what Jesus' inheritance is? Revelation 8, the kingdoms of this world. He shows him his inheritance. And then he says this, I will give you all of these. Very interesting that Jesus said, no, you don't have those. Jesus understood what happened in the garden and what He was there to do. He said, I will give you all of these. You can take a shortcut around the cross. You don't have to do that stuff. I'll just give it to you. But all I want in return is your worship. I'll give it to you. You can have it. All I want is your Greek word proskuneo, worship. Jesus looks out over the kingdoms. He looks at the glory. It's not just the kingdom structures. It's not the buildings. It's the glory of the nations. This is what He came for. This is what He promised. And is God's plan to give Him this? Is the cross the best way to go to get my inheritance? Does there really have to be a cross before resurrection and ascension into glory? Or can we bypass that hard stuff and can I just skip it and get my inheritance now? If He worships Satan, if He gave Satan his worship, he would be in subjection to him forever. We are in subjection. We belong to what we worship. That's how we're made. If Jesus falters and says, you know what? I was really second guessing that cross plan. That looked bad. You know what? I'll take it now. The offer would be, you can rule the nations, Jesus, but it will be independent from the Father. You do it yourself. Do it yourself. It's the same thing that Satan said to Adam and Eve in the garden. hey, you don't have to like yell cuss words at God, but do this. Eat the fruit and you'll be like him. And so you can consult him if you want, but you can be independent. You don't have to be dependent on him. You can do it yourself. The problem is we're image bearers. We're fundamentally incapable of independence. Spiritual neutrality is an illusion. We were made as image bearers, which means we are made, trichotomy, body, soul, and spirit, to be in communion with something. And whatever we're in communion with, we reflect. And so when Satan says, I'll give you the promise, you can skip this hard stuff, I'll give you the promise. All you got to do is come into communion with me, and then you'll reflect me. And Jesus looks at it and he says, "Be gone, Satan, for it is written, you shall proskuneo the Lord your God and serve him only." You know what? If Satan can't get you to quit, rush ahead in impatience, make a mess of stuff, if he can't get you to quit because of your own insecurities, then he'll actually give you what you want as long as it costs you your worship. He'll actually, Satan will promote you if it means that you'll leave the place of worship. Satan will give you everything, all your dreams. Do your dream. I'll give it to you. As long as you don't stay in that place of adoring the Lord, communing with him, and reflecting his nature to the earth, I'll give you what you want. You want to win the lottery? Cool, I'll do that, as long as you don't worship. You want to be the top of that mountain? Do that, as long as you don't worship. Why? Because wealth, influence, being the top of the mountains, 7 mountains, it's all for nothing if a worshiper's not there. There's no kingdom influence outside of being a priest before God. There's no kingdom activity and power and ministry and influence without worship. We have not prepared a generation in the big yes to take new territory and go, by the way, you're going to set on this road and I want to give you the sweetness of something. You're going to have to face the lion. But don't worry. If you keep moving forward, he's going to be with you the whole time. And every hidden victory you win will be something you can give the next generation. We right now, all over, we're stirring up the body of Christ to fight wars in the name of Jesus. We're going to fight social wars. We're going to fight cultural wars. We're going to fight political wars. But we're losing the battle in our own soul. The one that really matters. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world, if he has influence in every sphere of society, but he loses his own soul? Proverbs 16 says, a man who rules his own spirit is better than he who takes a city. We made an industry around rallying people out of fear, mobilizing movements. But what about unresolved anger? Do we have any honey to give a generation of unresolved anger? What about meekness? What about kindness? What about lust? What about lust? Do we have any honey to give a next generation? Any wisdom on how to win that battle? What about selfish ambition? What about greed? What about retaliation? You know what I'm reading right now? I'm reading everything Jesus addressed on the Sermon on the Mount. What about it? A generation sees us leaders stand up and say, we're going to take the nations. But are we instructing them when we're betrayed? Do they look at do they see the honey? Do they get the honey when they see something shift in our ministry and we get betrayed? Do they see wisdom come out? Or do we retaliate? We get made fun of on social media. Do they see the meekness of wisdom, or do they see retaliation? If you're going to pioneer, there are pioneering assignments. This is where I'm ending. There are pioneering assignments in this room. There are neighborhoods, there's nations, there's spheres. Stacy talked about it. You've been in prophetic ministry. You've gotten prophetic words. God's activating you. And I would not serve you well if I just said everything's going to be great now. Doors are going to open. Favor's going to happen. You're going to have all the money you need. You're going to have to face the lion. If you're going to take new territory, my missionaries, if we're going to take the Hindu world, if we're going to take the Muslim world, if we're going to take campuses, then prepare for your deepest fears to be thrown in front of your face. Prepare for your deepest insecurities to surface. Prepare for your deepest wounds to be exposed. But there's news, there's good news. Someone already walked the path for us, and it has been granted to you not only to follow him, but to suffer for his name. He can take you through it. I face the lion 100 times a day and fail, but someone has faced the lion on my behalf so I can get back in the game. If any man wants to come after me, he must first deny himself, pick up his cross, and follow me. Christ's cross made it possible for me to pick up my little Christ and magnify his cross. I'm not paying for my sin. That was done for me. What is happening when I pick up my cross? I am magnifying the fact that someone else took up his cross. His cross paid for me. My cross makes much of his cross. If we're going to take new territory, if we're going to take mountains, if we're going to carry these assignments, then we have to learn what faith means. It's not just revving up some excitement. It's standing in the middle of your deepest insecurities and going, but I believe God said I'm a son. It's standing in the middle of waiting when your timeline said, I needed that provision yesterday. And standing there in faith goes, but I know God's timing is perfect. Therefore, I will wait. It's standing when all the doors of opportunity open for you and going, but that'll cost me my worship. Faith says, I stay right here. I don't take every opportunity. I only obey the Father. If we walk that long obedience in the same direction, we begin to touch the one who endures to the end will be saved in this gospel of the kingdom. Some of you tonight, let's stand together. You know, the church at the end of the age, Revelation 12, we quote this, and I just believe that we have the wrong tone when we quote this verse. It says the great dragon was thrown down. You know it, the devil, Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He's thrown to the earth. He's knocked out of his second heaven's governmental position. And the loud voice in heaven says, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ has come. For the accuser of brethren has been thrown down to the earth. He's in real time now. We can get our hands on him. And it says they have conquered him, not by a machismo Christianity, not a chest-thumping Rambo group of people. You know how they conquered him? By the finished work of the cross, the blood of the Lamb, and the word of their testimony. You know what that means? They have a hidden history of God coming through in their weakest moments. They have a testimony. They faced the lion. A church at the end of the age that's going to conquer the dragon is made up of men and women who have faced the lion and overcome.